Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This Monday is a significant one for India from the diplomatic and strategic point of view. The Russian President Putin is enjoying the hospitality of the Indian Prime Minister here in the national capital as we speak. India and Russia have had their share of ups and downs in recent times. A blow-hot, blow-cold sort of relationship, some would say. So today was all about rekindling the old friendship. The two leaders were all smiles as the Russian President disembarked at the Hyderabad House, where his host was waiting. Prime Minister Modi hosted Vladimir Putin at the Hyderabad House, which is the Russian President's second foreign visit since the beginning of the pandemic. The first being to America and the second one to India, and that sets the tone for the importance of this meeting. At the moment, Foreign Secretary Harsh Singla briefing media on the fallout and the results of this meeting between the two heads of governments.
Defense and foreign ministers invited their counterparts, our Defense Raksha Mantri and External Affairs Minister, to visit Russia for the next 2+2 dialogue next year. The invitation was accepted and dates will be decided through diplomatic channels. As you can imagine, a very extensive cooperation extended to acknowledging the 50th anniversary of the 1971 Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation signed between India and the then Soviet Union. Also 2 decades of the Declaration of Strategic Partnership. This was in 2000 when President Putin had visited India that the strategic partnership was established. It's been 2 decades since then. Just to sum up, very positive trajectory of trade and investment relationship, new drivers of economic growth such as long-term sourcing and of course investment cooperation. Areas like fertilizers, coking coal, gas were certainly identified as possible areas of mutual interest. I think there was a sense that Russian companies could enhance their involvement in the 13 key sectors of the production-linked incentive scheme of the Government of India under our Atmanirbhar Bharat program and Make in India initiatives. There was a greater intensity of inter-regional dialogue on economic cooperation between the states, our states and the regions of Russia. I did mention about the Vibrant Gujarat initiative involving the Russian Far East. As an example, there was some reference to this. There was, of course, a very important development in the signing of the military cooperation program for the next 10 years. We also concluded the joint production of the AK-203 rifles. As you know, this has been under discussion for some time. This agreement was also concluded to satisfaction. It is another example of joint manufacturing under the Make in India program, greater involvement of Russia in investing in India jointly with Indian companies. The international north-south corridor, as I mentioned, provides a very cost-effective, faster multimodal transportation between Russia, Central Asia, Iran and India using the Chabahar port, and that connectivity is something that is...
Well, that was Harsh Singla, Foreign Secretary, and the biggest statement coming out from him was the fact that the issue of terrorists coming in from Pakistan, Lashkar-e-Toiba and their terror camps was something that came up in the discussion, and that would be a significant move forward, which we will be looking at. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to go through why this meeting is so very important, and the issue here is the body language between the two big leaders. In fact, the two leaders were all smiles as the Russian president disembarked at Hyderabad House. And if you look at them, the tone for the meeting was set by the first, hug that happened between the two of them. Second point that I want to tell you is that old friends old friends who really brought up the new alliance once again, emphasizing the fact that they were important, very important friends, as India and Russia have been through this entire Cold War period. And then there was India thinking that it needed to diversify, have other relationships. But President Putin, in his opening remarks itself, said India is a long-standing friend, and Prime Minister Modi recalled how over the decades Russia had been a key strategic partner, a great power, a friendly nation, and a time-tested friend, is how Putin described India when he spoke about bilateral trade between the two countries. Even before the two world leaders sat down to talk business, the Russian's defense minister met with his Indian counterpart, and several defense deals were inked. One big ticket deal was the AK-203 rifle deal. The defense ministers also agreed on extending military cooperation for another decade. But the most important takeaway from the brief statement made by the two leaders was that on terror, President Putin stressed on the need to fight terrorism along with drug trafficking and organized crime. Afghanistan was also an issue that came up as part of the dialogue. Let's listen in to those comments from the two world leaders.
कोविड की चुनौतियों के बावजूद भारत और रूस के संबंधों की रफ्तार में कोई बदलाव नहीं आया है। कोविड के खिलाफ लड़ाई में भी दोनों देशों के बीच बेहतरीन सहयोग रहा, चाहे वैक्सीन ट्रायल्स और उत्पादन में हो, मानवीय सहायता के लिए हो, या एक दूसरे के नागरिकों की देश वापसी के लिए हो। अफगानिस्तान और दूसरे क्षेत्रीय विषयों पर भी हम निरंतर संपर्क में रहे हैं। ऐसे में से एक बार फिर भारत में आपका स्वागत करता हूं, आपके डेलीगेशन का स्वागत करता हूं। इतनी व्यस्तता के बीच भी आपने भारत आने के लिए समय निकाला, ये हमारे लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। मुझे विश्वास है कि आज की चर्चा हमारे संबंधों के लिए बहुत उल्लेखनीय होगी। फिर एक बार आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Спасибо большое, уважаемый господин премьер-министр, дорогой друг. Мне очень приятно быть снова в дружественной стране, в Индии.
Dear Prime Minister, dear friends, I'm so very happy to be able to travel here to visit the friendly country of India.
Безусловно, беспокоит все, что связано с терроризмом.
Naturally, we are concerned about everything that has to do with terrorism.
И борьбой с ним, даже как с наркотиками, с организованной преступностью.
I mean the fight against terrorism, also fighting drug trafficking and organized crime.
В этой связи, конечно, нас не может не беспокоить ситуация и то, как она развивается в Афганистане.
And with that regard, naturally, we are concerned about the developments of the situation in Afghanistan.
So the legitimate question that we need to look at today is, has India been able to counter the China-Pakistan axis through this meeting with Russia and President Putin? That's the question, and that's the debate coming up on the other side.
You're watching the News Hour at 9, debate number 1, on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
And joining me tonight is Meera Shankar, former ambassador to the United States. Joining me on the News Hour, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, author, Brahma Chelani, strategic affairs expert. Also joining me this evening is Smita Prakash, editor of ANI. But my first question goes to Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hussain, defense analyst. And my question to you, Lieutenant General Hussain, is have India and Russia been able to walk the talk on a little bit of frostiness that had come into the ties, given the fact that India's defense purchases from Russia had come down? India seemed to be paying more attention to other countries like France and America, and that hadn't gone down well with Russia at all, which is why we saw the axis between Pakistan, China and Russia building up. Do you think this meeting would have achieved some deal of success in bringing back the warmth and countering this axis that could have been so detrimental to India?
Absolutely, Navika. The thing is that this was a very short visit, no doubt. 6 hours, but in 6 hours a tremendous amount has probably been achieved. The fact remains that this visit is coming after 2 years. First of all, this meeting is coming after 2 years. The fact that President Putin decided to go ahead with the meeting, despite the threat of various aspects of travel under all kinds of COVID threats at the moment, he decided to come here. He realized the importance of this particular meeting and the messaging which was required to be sent out to the rest of the world, that the India-Russia relationship continues to remain what it is. And I think the timing is very, very appropriate. 10 days before the 50th anniversary of an event in which the former Soviet Union and now Russia had played a major role. Well, it was a military psychological role, I would say, to a very great extent. And that contribution cannot be negated in any way. So I think with the host of issues that have been covered here, the fact that 2+2 has been introduced into this dialogue too, much like the other countries, like Australia, Japan, the United States, I think the seriousness of this dialogue is very much there. Now, as for your specific question on weaponry, I am told today that if India has war, 80% of India's hardware, military hardware, which will be fielded, will be of Russian-Soviet origin. So there is no doubt that there was a slight come down which had taken place. No doubt that the S-400 was purchased perhaps as a political or a diplomatic form at one time. But I can say as a defense analyst that the S-400 is probably the finest anti-aircraft system anywhere in the world existing. And the contract was given to Russia in competition with the third the United States had put up for sale. So it's not to say as if India-Russia relationship has dried up on the military front. We are also continuing with our military cooperation in different fields. And the fact that the family of the AK-203 rifle, the lack of weapons, are going to be manufactured in India, and probably all the paramilitary and the military forces are going to have this weapon, is going to be a very, very important symbolic gesture.
Absolutely. You couldn't have emphasized that more. But Mr. Brahmachalani, I want to ask you, many critics would look at this as a little bit of a photo opportunity in a sense, because there is the growing closeness of Russia with Pakistan and China, and of course Afghanistan. The fact that the terror conversation happened, the fact that this is Putin's second visit only since COVID began almost 2 years ago, first visit to America and then to India. Do you think this actually puts back the relationship of India and Russia, which has always been there, but there seemed to be a little bit of frostiness? Do you think the critics will be happy, or do you still think that there is some more strategic thinking that needs to go into what India needs to do, at least to counter Pakistan and China?
Well, first, Moscow has always been very important for India. In the liberation of Bangladesh, the Indo-Soviet Treaty played a pivotal role, as US declassified papers later showed. In 1971, Nixon and Kissinger were egging on China to intervene and stop India from liberating Bangladesh. So that Indo-Soviet Treaty was a masterstroke on the part of Indira Gandhi, and ever since then, the India-Moscow relationship has been quite pivotal to India's foreign policy interests. And the fact that India has demonstrated its strategic independence by defying the US and going ahead with the import of the Russian-made S-400 air defense system, that also underscores India's determination to safeguard its relations with Russia. As far as Putin's visit is concerned, and I think you correctly underlined the importance of the fact that first, he has refrained from traveling overseas. He only went to Geneva for a short visit for discussions with President Biden. That was the first overseas trip by Putin in more than a year and a half. And then after that, he's come to India. And just after returning from India, it'll be an overnight journey back home, he's going to have an online meeting with President Biden. And that meeting again is very important. So the fact that he still took time off from his busy schedule and came to India is by itself very significant. And I think as far as India is concerned, there's been a lot of talk about non-aligned India. Well, the fact is that India has moved from non-alignment to becoming multi-aligned, which means building close partnerships with major powers to pursue a variety of interests in diverse settings. And that enables India to advance its core interests and also helps India to preserve its strategic autonomy. And by shoring up ties with Russia, India can also lessen the risks of an overtly pro-US foreign policy. So in the larger strategic framework, Russia remains important for India, even though it's important for both countries, Russia and India, to revitalize their flagging partnership and make it more broad-based and not largely centered on defense transactions.
Absolutely. And Meera Shankar, I want to ask you, the broad basing of this relationship, the fact that Harsh Shringla, the Foreign Secretary, talks about oil and energy partnerships, you know, that's an important component of the engagement with Russia apart from the defense engagement. Do you think India and Russia, you know, in the kind of graph that everybody sees, at least politically, in India and outside, was a graph that was coming down a bit as India expanded to multi partnerships in the world and not just be a Indo-Russia kind of a relationship. Do you think apart from defense, energy coming in, do you think the fact that India also realizes the importance of having Russia on its side when it is surrounded with neighbors like China and Pakistan, this relationship will go to other areas for broad basing the engagement? Because at this moment, at least both countries realize that this is an important partnership.
Yes. First of all, let me agree with the previous panelists about the importance of the Russian relationship for India. Secondly, I think I would like to emphasize that since the collapse of the Soviet Union, actually, India and Russia have been trying to restructure their relationship, and there has been an element of continuity, particularly in the strategic and defense sectors. So defense, nuclear energy, space, these have been areas where we have been cooperating with Russia. But the economic relationship with Russia, which was based on rupee-ruble trade, had virtually come to stagnation, because Russia was looking more to the West and India was unable to compete in the Russian market without the support of the rupee-ruble trade arrangement. So I think this is an area where we need to focus more. President Putin mentioned that trade this year in the first half has been quite robust. It's grown by about 38%. But if we look at the targets which we had set ourselves, we are very far from reaching those targets. Again, investment is an area where some progress has been made. And two-way investment is of the order of $38 billion. Russian investment in India is around 18 billion, and Indian investment in Russia is around 13 billion, maybe more. But certainly energy could be a field where we could work out longer-term arrangements, and talks are ongoing in these sectors. There is also talk about Indian investment in the Far East, in Russia, in the energy field. So I think getting the economic relationship to be more robust than it is would be an important element of the overall relationship. At the political level, the world is more complex today than it has been. So while, the improvement or strengthening of relations with Russia is very important, I think it will not be a counter to the China-Pakistan axis, because Russia's relationship with China is very good. And it doesn't have to do, with the perceived shift of India more towards the US. It has more to do with the pressure which the US and the West imposed on Russia through economic sanctions after Ukraine, which virtually pushed Russia, to move much closer to China in terms of its energy relationship with long-term deals on pipelines and so on. And now Russia has also emerged as a major defense supplier to China, including the S-400, which we are getting, will also be sold to China. Now, having said this, I think it's important for us in India to realize that that about 60%, a little less than 60% today of India's equipment is of Soviet origin. And we need very good ties with Russia to keep our defense machinery oiled and functioning. The other important element is that Russia has been willing to share technology with us and also to enter into joint production of fairly sophisticated projects such as the BrahMos missile, even though they haven't been willing to share engine and other technology on BrahMos with us, even though it's jointly funded, but it is jointly produced. Now, we haven't got this level of technology from any other country, and the S-400, for instance, is a state-of-the-art
air defense system.
Air defense system. So it's not just the quantum, but I think also the kind of technology which we are able to get from Russia and the willingness to co-produce and also jointly develop. Now, here we have made some strides with the US, but very, very minimal. And that area has still to, develop into a concrete relationship. There are hurdles. So overall, I would say this visit has been important because President Putin is signaling that he attaches importance to India, and that this is his second visit since the COVID pandemic overseas, the first being the summit with American President Joe Biden. Secondly, we've signed a defense cooperation agreement which will lay out the framework of cooperation for the next 10 years. We have finalized the deal for the AK-203s, which will involve joint production in India and complete transfer of technology to India after a point of time. There are other areas which have been discussed. Energy,
that's right. S-400, Kemov helicopters. There are many other areas where
I think it would be a mistake to think of this as a counter to the China-Pak axis. That I think it is not. But it helps to build India's own strengths. It reduces your dependence on the United States, and at the same time, it provides you with some leverage in the region.
Well, absolutely, leverage as important as trying to counter an axis building around India at this point. Let me get in Smita Prakash, who's very often been reporting from some of these heads of states meeting. And I want to ask you, Smita Prakash, what did you make of Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, who in his statement said the extraordinary militarization and expansion of armament in our neighborhood and the completely unprovoked aggression on our northern border since early summer of 2020, during the defense ministers' meetings, 2+2 meetings in the morning. I want to ask you in this context, the fact that China, without being named, was mentioned, because obviously this was in reference to Galwan, etc. The fact that this was mentioned by Rajnath Singh, it was a deliberate mention without naming China, but putting India's expectations of its engagement with Russia very clearly on the table. At least that's the way I saw it. How did you see that?
Yeah, see, the defense minister was in Russia last year in the height of COVID. Russia has been with us even during the Chinese aggression. They are cozy with China. Russia is cozy with China, but at the same time, India is a strategic ally, and India has always looked to Russia, as all your panelists mentioned. Whenever there's been a military aggression in any form, it's the fallback option that India has always had historically, and it has always stayed on even keel till the 123 agreement deal with the US in 2005, and India became a strategic partner in actual terms with America. The world order also changed, and with that, the dynamics of relationship that India had with Russia, erstwhile Soviet Union was gone, so India had with Russia, and as Mr. Brahmacharlani pointed out, India has with many countries, because the non-aligned movement as we knew it and India's participation in that changed. It became more fluid, it became multi-aligned relationships that India had. So everything changed in the new world order. Russia too had to, it had this position that India cannot ask Russia, as you mentioned, India cannot ask Russia to choose between China and India. Similarly, India moving closer to the US and the Quad formation, and the Quad formation is not a military formation. Lots of people have been commenting about the Quad. It's not yet a military formation. So India has learned to navigate, and Russia will too. And the fact is that Russia is watching. Putin has come here. Putin's coming specifically for this is very important, because he's hands-on when it comes to foreign policy matters, very much like Modi. So his coming out here is also to check whether he will do some plain speak, and he will ask some direct questions to know which way the Indian foreign policy is moving. In the India-Russia relationship, there's a lot which happens behind the scenes than what actually is visible and what the media actually reports. The fact that Mr. Doval, Mr. Rajnath Singh, Mr. Jaishankar, they are very much a part of the negotiations which are happening. And in the Russian scheme of things, India cannot blink, Russia cannot blink. Pakistan and Russia have expanded their relationship because of Afghanistan. So this is very much in focus when it comes to India looking at how Russia engages with Pakistan regarding Afghanistan. And the fact is that Russia doesn't have blinkers like America did. I mean, America got to know that OBL was in its military jihadi complex in Pakistan. किसी का दोस्त नहीं और दुश्मन तो फिर खैर सबका है. This is something that Russia always knows about Pakistan. So though it engages with Pakistan, it doesn't have blinkers on. And that is why I think as far as India is concerned, there has to be a ductility in its relationship with Russia, just like it has with America. And I think Putin's visit is extremely important, not just in the defense framework, that is always there, as Ms. Meera Shankar pointed out, as General Hasnain pointed out, and as Brahmacharlani pointed out, that security alliance with America is a fact that has proven time and time again to be beneficial for India. But we also have independent security alliances with other countries, with say France and with America too.
Absolutely. Let me get in Dr. Anand Ranganathan. And Dr. Anand Ranganathan, want to ask you the statement that the Prime Minister is trying to make. At one level, it's a statement to the outside world. At another, it's also to domestic naysayers and critiques within the country. The fact that Putin has visited India 4 times in the last 7.5 years, compared to about thrice when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister. And these 4 times that he's visited in the Narendra Modi regime, excludes the 2 years actually where COVID ended any kind of travel, number one. Number two, the fact that the AK-203 rifle agreement, the technology transfer at some point, the joint production, and that too making these guns in Amethi. Now everybody remembers India, Russia from the times of Indira Gandhi, and now the guns will be produced in Amethi. Do you see a statement, political one, being made by Modi even for the domestic audience?
Good evening, Navika, and good evening to all my panelists.
No, there is no doubt about it. Mr. Modi and Mr. Putin share an excellent relationship, and I dare say one of the best relationships that are shared between 2 world leaders. And I think many experts on your panel have already elaborated in detail about the various domains in which we enjoy excellent relationships with Russia. With our bilateral trade now, in fact, $10 billion. It's skewed in the favor of Russia, which is inexplicable. It should be skewed in our favor, but hopefully things would change. They are saying we expect to have this trade, bilateral trade, to jump to about $30 billion in 5 years' time. So let's see. There's oil and gas. Ms. Kumar mentioned economic partnership, and there's excellent defense partnership. General Hasnan mentioned S-400. There is AK-203 that Smita mentioned. There is BrahMos. But let me concentrate on one aspect that I can elaborate myself to some extent, which is science and technology, because that should not be pushed to the fore, if you don't mind my saying so. Now, not many may know, but this year marks the 50th year of India-Russia science and technology cooperation. 50 years. The ILTP, or Integrated Long-Term Program, that was signed between India and the erstwhile Soviet Union 50 years ago. But it has continued even after the Soviet Union's breakup, and now enjoys excellent, I have to say, the excellent support from both India and Russia. A lot of money is being poured in by both countries. In fact, 8 advanced centers, 4 in very recent times, have been set up. For example, the Advanced Research Center for Powder Metallurgy and New Materials in Hyderabad. Just
interrupting you for a couple of seconds. Those are visuals that are just coming in as Prime Minister Narendra Modi is seeing off Mr. Putin after the conclusion of the talks between the 2 heads of state. Those visuals of the Prime Minister standing there waving out to the Russian President who's just completed his 8-hour visit to India. That's Hyderabad House, from where the cavalcade of Putin now leaves and heads straight to the airport, from where he goes back to Moscow. And that was an engagement that we're talking about here. Anand Ranganathan, running out of time, but going back to you, you have 60 seconds to continue with what you were saying.
Yes, no, very quickly, just to sum up. So, we've had excellent science and technology relationships. I mean, space science, of course, now has an added thing, the excellent cooperation. We have the bilateral agreement. Russia will train Indian cosmonauts for the human space mission, Gaganyaan. There is setting up of navigation satellite systems, India Navik. But most importantly, Navika, let me focus on one crucial aspect of scientific collaboration, the anti-COVID vaccine. India is now going to manufacture Sputnik Light. Now, this is crucial for one vital reason also, that we already have under India-Russia science technology setup, polio and other vaccine manufacturing set up in Bulandshahr. So I think this extended cooperation into the domain of science, specifically to battle COVID, augurs really well going forward into the future.
You haven't taken the bait of the Amethi statement. You brought in Bulandshahr.
I can.
You brought in Bulandshahr as well. So it's called killing 2 birds with 1 stone, Anand?
No. No, I was saying पहले इधर से आलू डालो उधर से सोना निकलता था, अब इधर से आलू डालो उधर से AK-203 निकलेगी.
Well, yes, it's only coincidental that Uttar Pradesh elections are going on, so guns being manufactured there. Ab tak katta banta tha, ab AK-203 banega, and vaccine banenge. So clearly, all in all, as Harsh Shringla, the Foreign Secretary, stated, this was a short but a very fruitful visit. Well, time will tell on what this visit yields, but clearly I can just tell our viewers tonight that a very, very close source to the Prime Minister once told me that Modi and Putin have a relationship where once President Putin told him that you've landed, why do you want to relax and meet next day for the meetings at the delegation level? Why don't you drop by for dinner? And there was an impromptu dinner where both of them met. They sat for 4 hours and it was just two of them in the room with their interpreters, and that's all. What was discussed is obviously something that many people say that will be in a book someday, but for the moment it seems like that relationship has worked and reciprocated by President Putin during his 7-8 hour visit to New Delhi. That's all on debate number 1. Thank you very much to my esteemed panel for joining me on this big debate on the Modi-Putin relationship and axis getting strengthened.